You're a survivor, Mom. Just figure it out. Click. Those were the last words my son said before hanging up on me at the airport. I'm standing here with everything I own stuffed into one beaten-up suitcase, and my own flesh and blood just told me to figure it out. You want to know what I had to figure out? How I went from owning a 3-bedroom cottage that my grandmother built with her bare hands to standing alone in Terminal B with $47 in my wallet and nowhere to go. My son Keon convinced me to sell everything. Everything. "It's a smart financial move, Mom," he said. "We'll get you set up in a nice apartment close to us. You'll never have to worry about maintenance or property taxes again." What he didn't mention? He was planning to take every penny and leave me stranded like a piece of luggage nobody wanted to claim. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's got a hell of a view. Because what happened next changed everything. My daughter-in-law showed up at that airport with something that made my son's betrayal look like child's play. If that opening line made your stomach drop, you're going to want to subscribe because this story gets so much worse before it gets better. And the revenge? Chef's kiss. Absolutely perfect. I'm talking about the kind of quiet, dignified payback that doesn't involve screaming matches or dramatic confrontations, the kind that hits deeper than any insult ever could, the kind that rebuilds your life while watching theirs crumble. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how a mother who would have walked through fire for her son ended up selling everything she owned for someone who was planning to abandon her from day one. Because the red flags, they were there. I just loved him too much to see them. Let me tell you about the cottage first, because understanding what I gave up makes the betrayal hit different. 3 generations of women had lived in that house. My grandmother bought it in 1952 with money she saved working double shifts at the textile mill, peeling blue paint, crooked front steps, and a garden that bloomed like something out of a fairy tale every spring. When my husband died 8 years ago, that cottage was all I had left of him. His coffee mug still sat in the kitchen cabinet. His reading glasses were still on the nightstand. I wasn't just selling a house. I was selling my history. But Kian had this way of talking that made everything sound so logical, so reasonable. He'd call every few weeks, and somehow the conversation always turned to my situation. "Mom, that roof is going to need replacing soon. Do you have 15 grand lying around? Mom, you're rattling around in that big house all alone. Wouldn't you rather have neighbors, community? Mom, property taxes are just going to keep going up. You're on a fixed income." Each conversation chipped away at my confidence a little more, made me feel like I was being stubborn instead of sentimental, like I was choosing a building over my son's practical wisdom. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "I've been thinking about your situation, and Lyra and I want you to come live near us." His voice had this excited energy I hadn't heard since he was a kid planning his birthday party. "There's this perfect setup here. We found you an apartment, 2 bedrooms, modern appliances, walking distance from us. You could sell the cottage and have enough left over to live comfortably for years." He laid it all out like a business proposal. The apartment complex had a community garden where I could still grow tomatoes. There was a senior center with activities. Lyra was excited about having me close by for weekly dinners. "Think about it, Mom. No more worrying about maintenance or repairs or being alone when something goes wrong. We'd be right there." I should have asked more questions, like why they'd been apartment hunting for me without mentioning it, or how they knew exactly what my cottage would sell for, or why this perfect plan required me to move
800 miles away from everyone I'd ever known. But when your child calls with enthusiasm in their voice, talking about family dinners and weekly visits with grandchildren I barely got to see, well, you don't ask those questions. You just feel grateful that someone wants you around. The red flags started early, if I'm being honest. When Kian was 12, he begged me for weeks to let him get a hamster, promised he'd feed it, clean the cage, take full responsibility. I finally gave in and bought him this sweet little golden hamster named Biscuit. Kian was obsessed for exactly 3 weeks. Then he saw his friend's new video game system, and suddenly Biscuit was boring. He stopped cleaning the cage, stopped feeding him. When I reminded him about his pet, he'd shrug and say, "Can't you just do it? I'm busy." I ended up taking care of Biscuit for 2 years until he died. And when he did, Kian didn't even seem sad. In high school, it was the car situation. He needed money for gas, for dates, for hanging out with friends. I'd slip him 20 here, 40 there. "I'll pay you back, Mom, I promise." Those promises evaporated the moment the money changed hands. When I'd gently bring up the debt weeks later, he'd look confused, like I was being petty for remembering. "Mom, I'm your son. Are you really going to charge me interest?" College was worse. Emergency after emergency that required immediate financial rescue. A textbook that cost $300. A meal plan that didn't cover enough food. A deposit for an apartment that had to be paid right now or he'd lose it. Each crisis felt urgent, necessary, reasonable. Each time, I emptied my savings a little more. After graduation, the emergencies continued but got bigger. First month's rent when he got his first job, money for work clothes, a car repair that couldn't wait, his wedding costs when he married Lyra. "Mom, her parents can't contribute much and we can't start our marriage in debt." I paid for flowers, photography, the rehearsal dinner. Kian promised to pay me back when he got his promotion. That was 4 years ago. But here's the thing. I didn't mind. That's what mothers do, right? We sacrifice so our children can build their lives. Every empty savings account felt like an investment in his future. Lyra was different from the girls he'd dated before. Quiet where they'd been loud. Thoughtful where they'd been demanding. At family dinners, she'd help me clear dishes without being asked. She'd remember details about my garden, ask follow-up questions about my doctor appointments, notice when I'd gotten my hair cut. I liked her immediately, but I also worried she was too good for Kian. Not because he didn't deserve love, but because she had this way of watching him during conversations, like she was taking notes, cataloging things. During their engagement, I caught her studying him once while he told a story about getting out of a speeding ticket by lying to the cop. Everyone else was laughing, but Lyra's face was completely neutral, just observing. I should have paid more attention to what she was seeing. When Kian called about the apartment and the move, Lyra got on the phone too. "We're so excited to have you close by," she said, but her voice sounded careful, measured. "It'll be wonderful to have family nearby." I asked if she was sure they wanted an old lady cramping their style. She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Of course we want you here," she finally said, but something in her tone made me wonder if she was answering my question or trying to convince herself. Looking back, I think that was the moment Lyra realized what Kian was planning and started making plans of her own.
The house sold faster than anyone expected. 3 weeks on the market, cash offer, closing in 10 days. Kian was thrilled. "See, Mom, I told you it was the right time to sell. The market's perfect right now." I should have been happy, but something felt off about the speed, like someone had been waiting for me to list it. When I mentioned this to Kian, he laughed it off. "You're overthinking it. Good houses sell fast." The packing was brutal.
67 years of life doesn't fit into boxes easily. Every drawer held memories, birthday cards from Kian when he was little, love letters from my husband, report cards and school photos, and Father's Day gifts made from construction paper. I called Kian for help, thinking maybe this could be a bonding experience. We could go through things together, share stories, decide what was worth keeping. "Mom, I'm swamped at work right now. Just pack the important stuff and donate the rest. You don't need all that clutter in your new place anyway." Clutter. He called 67 years of memories clutter. Lyra showed up instead. Didn't call first, just knocked on my door with coffee and moving boxes. "Kian's tied up with a project, but I thought you might want company." We spent the entire day going through photo albums. She listened to every story, asked questions about people and pictures, helped me decide what was truly precious versus what I was keeping out of guilt. She wrapped my grandmother's china like it was made of butterfly wings. When we got to Kian's old bedroom, she got quiet. His high school trophies, childhood toys, artwork I'd saved because what mother throws away their child's drawings? "Are you taking these to him?" she asked, holding up a box of his things. "I thought I'd give them to him when I got there. Sentimental value, you know?" She nodded, but didn't say anything. Just kept wrapping things in newspaper, with this expression I couldn't read. The week before my flight, the weird calls started. First, it was Kian asking about the closing date, then about when the money would hit my account, then about whether I'd already bought my plane ticket. "Just making sure everything's on track," he'd say. "We want to have everything ready for your arrival." But the questions felt calculating, like he was checking items off a list instead of planning a reunion. 3 days before I was supposed to leave, I called the apartment complex he'd mentioned, just to introduce myself, maybe ask about the community garden he'd talked up. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any units available," the manager said. "We've got a waiting list 6 months long." My stomach dropped. "But my son said he'd found me a 2-bedroom unit there." "Not through us. Maybe he was thinking of a different complex." I called Kian immediately. He sounded annoyed when I brought it up. "Mom, things change fast in the rental market. That unit got snatched up, but don't worry, we'll find you something even better when you get here. It's easier to apartment hunt in person anyway." Red flag number 1000, but I pushed down my doubts. Kian was handling this. He knew the area. He wouldn't leave me stranded. The night before my flight, I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I kept thinking about that phone call with Lyra. What did she mean, pack light? Why only irreplaceable things? I'd already packed light. 1 suitcase, a carry-on with important documents, and my purse. Everything else was either sold, donated, or thrown away. What I had with me was already just the irreplaceable stuff. But sitting on that plane, watching the ground disappear below me, I realized I'd misunderstood what irreplaceable meant. I thought it meant objects, photos, jewelry, mementos. I didn't realize it meant dignity, security, the ability to go home. Those things, I was about to lose them all. When we landed, I turned my phone back on and immediately texted Kian. "Just landed. See you soon?" The response was immediate. "Running a few minutes late. Grab some coffee and I'll be right there." Then 20 minutes later, "Traffic is crazy. Maybe another 30 minutes. Then an hour later, "Sorry, work emergency. Almost done here." Each text felt like a small betrayal, like he was buying time for something. I sat in that airport for 3 hours, watching families reunite around me, watching other passengers get picked up by people who were excited to see them, watching my hope shrivel up like a flower in the desert. But I still believed he was coming. Even when my call started going to voicemail, even when the texts stopped altogether. Even when airport security asked if I needed help because I'd been sitting in the same spot for so long. If you're feeling that knot in your stomach right now, you're not alone. Drop a comment if you've ever been left waiting by someone you trusted completely, because what happened next still makes me sick to think about. I should have realized this was just the beginning of my nightmare.
Hour 3, my phone finally rang. The relief was so intense I almost cried right there in the middle of the terminal. Finally. He was calling to apologize, to explain, to tell me he was 5 minutes away. Kian? Oh, thank God. Where are you? I've been sitting here for... I'm not coming. 3 words. That's all it took to destroy everything I thought I knew about my son, my life, my future. The airport noise didn't stop, but somehow I couldn't hear it anymore, like my brain had just disconnected from reality to protect itself. What do you mean you're not coming? My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from someone else. Kian, what are you talking about? Look, Mom. His tone was so casual it was obscene, like he was telling me he'd be late for dinner, not that he was abandoning me in a strange city with nowhere to go. I'm just going to be straight with you. Lyra and I need this money. We've got some debt issues and we're planning to buy a bigger house. Debt issues? A bigger house? But the apartment, you said you found me an apartment. He actually laughed. Not a bitter laugh or an embarrassed laugh, a genuinely amused laugh, like I just told him a joke. There is no apartment, Mom. There never was. We can't afford to have you living near us or, honestly, anywhere that would be our responsibility. It just doesn't fit into our financial plans right now. Financial plans? He was talking about me like I was a line item in a budget that didn't balance? Ken, you made me sell the house. You made me sell everything. My grandmother's house, your father's. It was a smart financial decision, at least for me. Look, that old house was just sitting there losing value anyway. Now the money's working for us instead of being tied up in some sentimental property you couldn't afford to maintain. Working for us. Not working for me. For us. Him and Lyra. Where am I supposed to go? The question came out as a whisper because I was afraid if I spoke any louder I'd start screaming. You're resourceful, Mom. You raised me as a single parent. You handled Dad's death. You've been independent your whole life. You'll figure something out. Maybe find a nice senior community or something. Wasn't that the original plan anyway before you got all sentimental about that house? Senior community. With what money? The money he'd just stolen? Look, I really have to go. Lyra and I have a realtor appointment to look at houses. Don't worry about it too much, okay? You're a survivor. You always land on your feet. And then he hung up. I stood there holding my phone, like it might ring again. Like he might call back and say, "Just kidding, Mom. April Fools. I'm pulling up to the curb right now." But April was 2 months ago, and my son had just thrown me away like garbage. The phone was still pressed to my ear when I heard a woman behind me whisper to her husband, "That poor lady, she's been sitting here for hours." That's when it hit me. Other people had been watching this whole time, watching me wait for someone who was never coming, watching me get more desperate with each passing hour, watching me become this pathetic figure they felt sorry for. The humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal. I looked around at the terminal with fresh eyes, at the happy families hugging and laughing, at the couples walking out hand in hand, at the business travelers being efficiently collected by car services. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone belonged to someone. Except me. I walked to the big windows overlooking the pickup area and watched cars come and go, watched people load luggage and drive away to their real lives, lives that included them.
For the first time since my husband died, I understood what truly alone meant. When he passed, I was devastated, but I still had my house, my community, my routines. I still belonged somewhere. Now, I belonged nowhere. I had no house to return to, no community that expected me, no routine to fall back on. At 67 years old, I was starting over with less than $50 and no plan. The practical reality started hitting me like punches. Where would I sleep tonight? How would I eat? How do you even begin to rebuild a life when you have nothing to build with? I thought about calling my neighbor Mrs. Patterson, but what would I say? Hi, remember how I sold my house and moved away? Well, my son abandoned me at the airport. Can I sleep on your couch for the next forever? I thought about calling my sister in Florida, but we hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since she told me Kian was using me and I defended him like a fool. Turns out she was right. I sat back down in that plastic airport chair and tried to think. There had to be options. There had to be resources for situations like this. Senior services, maybe? Homeless shelters? Homeless shelters. 3 hours ago, I was a homeowner planning a new chapter of my life. Now, I was researching homeless shelters on the airport's free Wi-Fi? That's when the anger hit me. Not the screaming, throwing things kind of anger. The cold, calculating kind. The kind that crystallizes your thoughts instead of clouding them. Kian thought he was so smart, thought he'd pulled off the perfect con, get mom to liquidate all her assets, transfer the money, then leave her stranded too far away to cause problems. But he made one crucial mistake. He underestimated what a mother's love could drive someone to do, and he definitely underestimated his wife. Because while I was sitting in that airport chair planning my next move, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Gate B7, look for the woman in the blue sweater. I looked up confused. Gate B7 was right across from where I was sitting. And there, walking toward me with purpose and determination, was Lyra. But the expression on her face wasn't what I expected. She didn't look surprised to find me alone. She didn't look confused about where Kian was. She looked like someone who had been planning this moment for weeks. "Hello, Ilowin," she said quietly when she reached me. "I've been waiting for you." Not waiting to pick me up, waiting for me, like she had known exactly how this would play out. "Lyra, what are you doing here? Where is Kian?" She sat down in the chair next to mine and looked me directly in the eyes. "Kian is exactly where he planned to be, at home spending your money on a house you'll never see. But what he didn't plan on was me." The way she said it sent chills down my spine. Not scared chills, excited chills. "What do you mean?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, thick, official looking. "I mean, your son isn't as smart as he thinks he is, and he definitely doesn't know his wife as well as he should." She handed me the envelope. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside were 2 things, a key and a deed. A deed with my name on it. But what Lyra told me next made me realize this betrayal went deeper than I ever imagined. "I've known about Kian's plan for 2 months, Lyra said, her voice steady and calm as we sat in that airport. "I've been preparing for this day since the moment he told me what he was really going to do with your house money." My hands were shaking as I held the deed, my name typed in official legal font, an address I'd never seen. You knew he was going to abandon me?" "I knew the moment he started asking me detailed questions about senior care facilities. Not nice retirement communities, Elawan. State-funded facilities. The kind with waiting lists and shared rooms and no visiting hours." The blood drained from my face. "He was going to put me in a... He wasn't going to put you anywhere. His plan was simpler than that. Leave you here, let you figure out your own accommodations with whatever pocket money you had left, and wash his hands of responsibility. In his mind, you'd either find some government program to take care of you, or... She trailed off. Or what? Or it wouldn't be his problem anymore. But it gets worse, Lyra continued, and I didn't think that was possible. The house sale? He had a buyer lined up before you even agreed to sell. His friend Marcus put in that cash offer. They planned the whole thing. What do you mean planned? Kian's been in debt for 3 years. Not small debt, Elawan. Gambling debt. To some very unpleasant people who don't accept payment plans. The kind of people who make threats about kneecaps and family members. My son, my golden boy, who I thought was successful and stable, was a gambler in debt to dangerous people? He's been using our joint account to make minimum payments, but it wasn't enough. They wanted the full amount by the end of this month, or they were going to start making good on their threats, starting with me. The casual way she said it made me realize this woman had been living in fear while I was happily planning my new life as a devoted mother and grandmother. So the house sale wasn't about getting me a nice apartment. It was about saving his own skin. The apartment was never real, Elawan. None of it was real. He needed you gone because he knew once you found out the truth about his debts, about where your money really went, you'd never forgive him. Distance was damage control. I stared at this woman I thought I barely knew and realized she'd been protecting me from knowledge that would have destroyed me months earlier. While I was packing boxes and dreaming of family dinners, she was watching my son plan my destruction. Why didn't you warn me? Because you wouldn't have believed me. You would have defended him, asked him directly, and he would have spun some story that made me look jealous or vindictive. Then you'd have sold the house anyway just to prove I was wrong. She was right. I would have done exactly that. But I couldn't just stand by and let him destroy you, so I started making my own plans. My grandmother left me money when she died last year. Not a fortune, but enough. Kian doesn't know about it because it came through a trust that bypassed our joint accounts. I've been keeping it secret for exactly this kind of emergency. She showed me photos on her phone. A small cottage with weathered siding and an overgrown yard. I found this place 6 weeks ago. It was a foreclosure, being sold for cash only. The owner died. The family just wanted it gone quickly. It needed work, but it was structurally sound. I studied the photos. It looked tired and forgotten, but there was something about it that reminded me of my grandmother's cottage. The same kind of sturdy bones that just needed love to shine again. I bought it, she said simply. Paid cash, closed in 2 weeks. The deed is in your name only. But why? This is your inheritance, your money. Why would you? Because what he was planning to do to you is unforgivable, and because someone in this family needs to have a conscience. I started crying then, not the dignified tears I'd been fighting all day, but ugly, grateful, overwhelmed sobs. This woman had spent her inheritance to save me from her own husband. But what about your marriage? If Kian finds out, Kian has made his choice. He chose gambling over his family's security. He chose lies over trust. He chose to destroy his mother rather than face the consequences of his actions. I'm just making sure his choices don't destroy you too.
The drive to the cottage took 40 minutes through neighborhoods I didn't recognize. Lyra drove with quiet confidence, like she'd made this trip many times before. I've been working on it every weekend for the past month, she explained. While Kian thought I was visiting my sister, I was actually here, cleaning and painting and making basic repairs. It's not perfect, but it's livable. And it's yours. We pulled into a gravel driveway beside a small white cottage with blue shutters. The yard was neat now, with fresh mulch around a few young trees.
Someone had planted flower boxes under the windows. You did all this? I had help. The previous neighbors, the Hendersons, felt bad about Mrs. Chen dying alone and her family just abandoning the place. When I explained I was fixing it up for someone who needed a fresh start, they volunteered their time. She handed me the key. Go ahead, open your front door. The key turned smoothly in a lock that had obviously been replaced recently. The door opened to reveal hardwood floors that gleamed with fresh polish, walls painted a warm cream color, and furniture arranged to catch the afternoon light streaming through clean windows. The furniture came with the house, but I had it cleaned and repaired. There's a washer and dryer in the basement, a full kitchen with new appliances, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. I walked through room after room, touching surfaces, opening cabinets, trying to comprehend that this was real, that someone had created this sanctuary for me while I was being betrayed by my own son. In the kitchen, there was a note on the refrigerator. Welcome home, Elowen. You deserve peace. Your neighbors, Jim and Martha Henderson. They don't even know me, I whispered. They know enough. They know you're starting over after someone hurt you. That's all they needed to know to want to help. I turned to Lyra, still overwhelmed. How did you know I'd need this? How did you know he'd really go through with abandoning me? Her face darkened. Because I tested him. Last week, I told him I'd been researching senior housing options in case his plan with the apartment fell through. Do you know what he said? I shook my head. He said, good thinking. Better to have backup plans. Old people are adaptable. Old people are adaptable. Like I was a stray cat that could survive anywhere. That's when I knew for certain he was planning to abandon you. No son who actually cared about his mother's well-being would be relieved that she might end up in an institution. But here's the beautiful part, Lyra said, sitting down at the kitchen table like she owned the place, which I realized she kind of did. Kian thinks he's so smart, but he forgot one crucial detail. What's that? He forged your signature on the account transfer. My blood went cold. He what? The money from your house sale, he had it transferred directly to his personal account, not a joint account where you'd have access. To do that legally, he needed your written authorization. Since you never gave it, he forged it. I sat down heavily in the chair across from her. That's a federal crime. It's bank fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse, the trifecta of felonies that prosecutors love. Do you have proof? She smiled for the first time all day. I have copies of everything. The transfer documents, the forged signature, the bank records. I've been documenting his crimes for weeks. I'm getting emotional just telling this story. If Lyra's actions gave you chills like they did me, smash that like button. This woman deserves all the recognition for what she did next. So what happens now, I asked. Now? Now we let him enjoy his victory for exactly as long as it takes for his world to fall apart, which should be, she checked her watch, about 3 hours. What happens in 3 hours? That's when the bank calls him to verify some unusual account activity. And when they discover he can't produce the original authorization documents because they don't exist, things get very interesting very quickly. But even as she was explaining his downfall, I couldn't shake the feeling there was more she wasn't telling me. Something bigger than bank fraud. Lyra, I said carefully, what else did you do? Lyra's smile turned absolutely wicked. What else did I do? Oh, Elowen, I saved the best for last. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text screenshots. Messages between her and someone named Detective Rodriguez. I've been working with the Financial Crimes Unit for 3 weeks.
not just about the forged documents, but about something much bigger. My heart started racing. What do you mean, bigger? Remember how I said Kian owes gambling debts? What I didn't mention is that his bookie, Tony Marcelli, is currently under federal investigation for money laundering. The FBI has been tracking every transaction in and out of Tony's operation for 6 months. She scrolled to another screenshot, bank records showing transfers from Kian's account to something called Marcelli Consulting Services. Your house money, the $340,000 from the sale? Kian transferred it directly to Tony to pay his debts. All of it, every penny went straight into a money laundering operation that the feds had been building a case against. I felt like I was going to be sick. So not only did he steal my money, but he used it for something illegal? Oh, it gets better. Tony Marcelli doesn't just run illegal gambling operations. He also owns several legitimate businesses that he uses to clean dirty money, including a real estate investment company. She paused dramatically. Want to guess who Tony's business partner is in that real estate company? No. Marcus, the friend who made the cash offer on your house. The room started spinning. You're telling me? I'm telling you that Kian, Marcus, and Tony have been running a scam for months. They target elderly homeowners in financial distress, convince them to sell quickly for cash, then use the proceeds to pay gambling debts while simultaneously laundering money through fake real estate transactions. How many people have they done this to? 7 families in the past 2 years, all elderly, all convinced by family members to sell family homes for financial security, all of them ending up in state facilities or homeless shelters while their money disappeared into Tony's operation. I couldn't speak. My son wasn't just a gambling addict who betrayed his mother. He was part of an organized criminal enterprise that targeted vulnerable elderly people. But here's where it gets really beautiful. Lyra continued, the FBI needed someone on the inside to make their case stick, someone with access to bank records, someone Tony and Marcus trusted, someone who could document transactions without raising suspicion. Someone like a wife? Someone exactly like a wife. I've been an informant for 2 months, Elowen. Everything Kian told me about his plans, every conversation with Marcus, every meeting with Tony, it's all on record with the FBI. She showed me another text thread, this one identified as Agent Sarah Chen, Financial Crimes Division. Agent Chen is Mrs. Chen's daughter. When her mother died and the family decided to sell the cottage quickly, Sarah reached out to me. She'd been investigating reports of elder financial abuse in the area and recognized some patterns. When I told her about Kian's plan for you, she offered me a way to stop him while helping their investigation. So the cottage purchase was part of a federal sting operation. The FBI provided the funds through an asset forfeiture account, money they'd already seized from Tony's other operations. It's poetic justice, really. Criminals' money being used to save their victims.
As on cue, Lyra's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID and smiled. It's Kian. Want to bet he's panicking right about now? She put it on speaker. Lyra, where the hell are you? The bank called me with some questions about account transfers, and I need you to verify some information. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. I'm busy, Kian. What kind of questions? They want documentation for the transfer from Mom's account. They said something about authorization signatures not matching their records. I told them you handled all that paperwork. Really? You told them I handled forging your mother's signature? Dead silence on the other end. Lyra, what are you talking about? I didn't forge anything. Mom authorized that transfer. No, Kian, she didn't. Mom never authorized any transfer to your personal account. You forged her signature because she was supposed to be getting an apartment, remember? which never existed. Look, there might have been some miscommunication about the details, but there was no miscommunication. There was fraud, federal fraud, and it's all documented. Another long silence. Lyra, where are you? We need to talk about this in person. I'm with your mother. Your what? Where is she? The airport said she never picked up her luggage. She's safe. She's in her new home. The one I bought her with money you don't know about. What new home? What money? Lyra, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Do you want to know what else should scare you? Lyra, Tony Marcelli was arrested this morning, along with Marcus. Federal agents raided both their homes and businesses at 6 a.m. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear Kian's breathing change over the phone. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally said, but his voice was shaking. Really? Because the FBI has records of every payment you made to Marcelli Consulting Services. They have documentation of the money laundering scheme. They have witness testimony about targeting elderly victims. And they have a cooperating witness who's been recording conversations for 2 months. Cooperating witness? Who would? Lyra, you didn't. I did. Every conversation, Ken, every plan, every cruel comment about your mother, every detail about how you were going to abandon her in an airport and leave her homeless, it's all on record. You betrayed me, your own husband? The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. You betrayed me? You betrayed you? Lyra's voice rose for the first time all day. You planned to leave your 67-year-old mother stranded in a strange city with no money, no home, and no way to contact you? You stole her life savings to pay gambling debts to criminals. You forged her signature on federal documents? And you're mad at me for betraying you? That's different. She's just... Finish that sentence, Kian. I dare you. He didn't. She's just what? Just your mother. Just the woman who raised you alone after your father died. Just the person who emptied her savings account for every fake emergency you invented. Just the human being who loved you unconditionally for 38 years. Lyra, please, we can fix this. We can figure something out. There's nothing to figure out, Kian. FBI agents are probably at your door right now. As she'd summoned them, we heard pounding and shouting in the background of the call. FBI, open the door! Shit, he whispered. Lyra, please, you have to help me. I'm your husband. No, she said calmly. You're a criminal who happens to be married to me. There's a difference. She hung up.
We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the peaceful quiet of the cottage. Birds chirping outside, wind moving through the trees, the distant sound of children playing in a neighbor's yard. Is it over? I finally asked. The criminal case is just beginning, but for you, for us, yes, it's over. What happens to you now? I mean, with your marriage? I filed for divorce yesterday. Agent Chen helped me understand my legal options. Since I was acting as an FBI informant, I'm protected from any retaliation or financial liability for Kian's crimes. The house we lived in was purchased with money from the gambling operation, so it'll be seized as evidence. But honestly, I don't want anything that was bought with stolen money anyway. She looked around the little cottage with satisfaction. This feels more like home than anywhere I've lived with him. You're going to stay here? With me? If you'll have me, I need a place to start over too. I reached across the table and took her hand.
You saved my life, Lyra. You saved my dignity, my future, my faith in humanity. Of course I'll have you." That evening, as we sat on the front porch watching the sunset, I asked her the question that had been nagging at me all day. When did you first realize what kind of person Kian really was? She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. "Our wedding day," she finally said. "During the reception, your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, came up to congratulate us. She was so sweet, telling me stories about how you used to babysit her kids when Kian was little so you could earn extra money for his school supplies." I remembered Mrs. Patterson, and I remembered those babysitting jobs. She said you never bought anything for yourself, that every penny went toward making sure Kian had what he needed: new clothes, school supplies, sports equipment. She said you wore the same winter coat for 15 years because you spent your coat money on his football cleats. That coat, I'd forgotten about that coat. When she walked away, I turned to Kian and said, "Your mother sounds like an amazing woman. You're so lucky to have someone who sacrificed so much for you." Do you know what he said? I shook my head, afraid to hear it. He said, "Yeah, well, that's what mothers are for, right? That's their job." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. That's when I knew I'd married someone who saw love as an obligation instead of a gift. Someone who confused devotion with servitude. Someone who would take and take and take until there was nothing left, then blame you for being empty. She squeezed my hand. I decided that night that if he ever tried to hurt you, I'd stop him. I just never imagined it would take him 6 years to show his true colors completely. As the stars came out above our little cottage, I realized something profound. I'd spent 38 years loving a son who saw me as a resource to be exploited. But in one day, I'd gained a daughter who saw me as a human being worth protecting. Sometimes the family that chooses you is stronger than the family you're born into. But the story wasn't over, because Kian's arrest was just the beginning of consequences I never saw coming. The first frost of winter sparkled on the vegetables in our garden as I picked the last of the late-season tomatoes. Our garden, it still gave me chills to think those words. Lyra emerged from the house with 2 steaming cups of coffee and the morning newspaper. She'd taken to reading me the important headlines each morning, a ritual that felt more intimate than anything I'd ever shared with my actual family. "The Marcelli trial starts next week," she said, settling into the porch swing we'd bought at a yard sale and restored together. "Agent Chen says we might be called to testify." I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "Are you ready for that? Are you?" 6 months ago, the thought of facing Kian in a courtroom would have terrified me. Now I felt nothing but a quiet, steady strength. The cottage had become something magical under our care. What started as a weathered refuge had bloomed into a showplace that drew admiring comments from every neighbor who walked by. We'd painted the exterior a cheerful yellow with white trim. Lyra had a gift for gardening that rivaled my own, and together we'd transformed the overgrown yard into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Raised beds overflowing with vegetables, flower borders that bloomed in succession from spring through fall, a small greenhouse where we started seedlings to sell at the farmer's market. The farmer's market, that had been Lyra's idea. "You have a gift," she had said one morning, watching me tend to our tomato plants, "and gifts are meant to be shared." Our little stand started with extra vegetables from our garden. Within a month, We had regular customers asking about our preserves, our herb blends, our homemade soaps made with lavender we grew ourselves. Within 3 months, we were making enough money to cover our monthly expenses. Within 6 months, we had a waiting list of people wanting to buy our products. Elowen's Garden, Lyra had named it, painting the sign herself in elegant script, because this all grew from your strength. But it wasn't just my strength, it was ours. We were partners in every sense of the word, sharing work and dreams and the quiet satisfaction of building something beautiful from nothing.
The neighbors who had helped Lyra prepare the cottage had become our chosen family. Jim and Martha Henderson, the couple next door, treated us like the daughters they'd never had. Martha taught me her grandmother's recipe for apple butter. Jim helped us install shelving in the greenhouse and refused payment, saying, "Neighbors help neighbors. That's how it's supposed to work." Across the street, the Newens invited us to their grandson's birthday party. At the end of the block, elderly Mrs. Foster asked if we'd check on her when the weather was bad, and we did, often staying for tea and stories about her late husband's rose garden. This was what community felt like. Not people who tolerated you because you shared DNA, but people who welcomed you because they saw who you truly were. Kian's arrest had made headlines in 3 states. Local man charged in federal elder abuse scheme. FBI breaks up multi-state financial fraud ring. Son accused of stealing mother's life savings for gambling debts. The articles included his mugshot, the golden boy I'd raised, looking haggard and desperate in orange jail clothing. I felt sorry for that young mother who'd believed her son was destined for greatness. She couldn't have known she was raising a predator. The charges were extensive: conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, elder abuse, identity theft, and racketeering. The federal prosecutor told us Kian was looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Tony Marcelli and Marcus had already plea bargained for reduced sentences in exchange for testimony. Kian apparently still believed he could talk his way out of consequences. Some things never change. His lawyer contacted me, Lyra told me one morning, her voice carefully neutral. They want to arrange a plea deal. Kian would testify against some of Tony's other associates in exchange for a lighter sentence. And they wanted to know if we'd be willing to provide character testimony. You know, talk about his troubled childhood, his gambling addiction, how he's really a good person who made bad choices. I stared at her. What did you tell them? I told them that his childhood wasn't troubled. He was loved, supported, and given every opportunity. I told them that his gambling addiction doesn't excuse elder abuse. And I told them that good people don't abandon their mothers in airports. She took a sip of coffee and gazed out at our garden. I also told them that if they called you asking for sympathy, I'd report them for witness intimidation. This woman, this fierce, protective, brilliant woman who'd saved my life in every way that mattered. The most satisfying part of our new life was how ordinary it had become. We woke up each morning in a house that was truly ours. We worked in a garden that fed both our bodies and our souls. We ran a business that served our community and supported our simple needs. We didn't drive fancy cars or wear expensive clothes. We didn't take lavish vacations or eat at upscale restaurants. But we had something money can't buy: peace. Peace in knowing that no one could take our home away on a whim.
peace in knowing that the people around us genuinely cared about our well-being, peace in knowing that we'd not only survived betrayal, but we'd built something beautiful from the ashes. Every morning when I walked through our garden, picking herbs for the day's cooking or checking on seedlings in the greenhouse, I thought about that woman standing in the airport 6 months ago, broken, abandoned, hopeless. She couldn't have imagined this life, couldn't have dreamed that rock bottom would become the foundation for something stronger than anything she'd lost. 3 weeks before the trial was set to begin, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mom?" Kian's voice was small, defeated, nothing like the confident man who'd hung up on me at the airport. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something." I looked at Lyra, who had gone very still. She nodded slightly, encouraging me to hear him out. "What is it, Kian?" "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, and I know you have no reason to believe me, but I needed to say it. What I did to you was unforgivable." For a moment, he sounded like the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he had nightmares. "Are you calling because you're facing prison time, or because you actually understand what you did wrong?" Long silence. "Both," he admitted, "but mostly because sitting in this cell for 6 months has given me time to think about who I became, and I hate that person, Mom. I hate what I did to you. I hate that I threw away the best relationship in my life for money that wasn't even mine to take. Kian, I know Lyra saved you. The FBI told me about the cottage, about your business, about how you're thriving. I'm glad. You deserve every good thing that's happening to you." I felt tears threatening and wasn't sure if they were sadness or relief. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "I just wanted you to know that losing you was the worst consequence of all my bad choices, worse than prison, worse than losing everything else, because everything else was built on lies, but your love was real." Kian, I have to go, but Mom, I'm glad you found a real family, even if it wasn't with me. The line went dead. Lyra reached over and squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a long moment. Sad for the little boy he used to be, but grateful for the life he led me to. That conversation would be the last time we ever spoke, but it wasn't the end of consequences, because what happened at the trial shocked everyone, including the FBI.
The federal courthouse in downtown was nothing like the cozy cottage Lyra and I had made our sanctuary. All marble and mahogany, designed to intimidate. But as we walked through those imposing doors, I felt nothing but calm strength. Agent Shin met us in the hallway outside the courtroom. "Are you ready for this?" I looked at Lyra, who squeezed my hand. "We're ready." What we weren't ready for was seeing Kian. A year in federal holding had changed him completely. Gone was the confident, smooth-talking man who'd abandoned me at that airport. The person sitting at the defendant's table looked hollow, aged, broken in ways that had nothing to do with physical appearance. But it was his eyes that shocked me. When they met mine across that courtroom, I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. Not the calculated manipulation I'd grown used to over the years. Not the charming smile that had gotten him out of trouble since childhood. Real, bone-deep regret. The federal prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically. Bank records, forged documents, recorded conversations, testimony from other victims. The scope of the operation was staggering. Over $2 million stolen from elderly victims across 3 states. When they played the recording of Kian explaining to Tony Marcelli how easy it was to manipulate old people who trust family, I watched several jury members physically recoil. "They don't ask hard questions," his voice echoed through the courtroom. "They just hand over their life savings if you frame it right. My mom's been supporting me financially my whole life anyway. This is just more efficient." More efficient. He'd called destroying my life more efficient. Lyra's testimony was devastating in its calm precision. She explained how she'd documented the conspiracy, how she'd saved evidence, how she'd worked with the FBI to protect not just me, but future victims. "Why did you decide to become an informant?" the evidence asked. "Because someone had to speak for the people who couldn't speak for themselves. Someone had to make sure that the people who were supposed to protect these victims didn't get away with destroying them instead." When it was my turn to testify, I kept my voice steady and factual. I told them about selling the house, about the airport, about discovering that everything my son had told me was a lie. "Mrs. Morrison," the prosecutor said gently, "in your own words, how did this experience affect you?" I looked directly at Kian before answering. "It taught me the difference between love and manipulation. Real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your security for someone else's comfort. Real love doesn't involve lies or ultimatums or abandonment. For 38 years, I thought I was being a good mother by giving my son everything he wanted. I realize now that I was actually enabling someone who saw kindness as weakness and generosity as stupidity." Kian's head dropped to his hands. Kian's lawyer tried the expected strategies: gambling addiction as mental illness, childhood trauma from his father's death, financial pressure from dangerous criminals. But when Kian took the stand in his own defense, something unexpected happened. "I could stand here and blame my addiction," he said, his voice barely audible. "I could talk about the pressure I was under from Tony's people. I could try to make you understand why I felt like I had no choice." He looked directly at me. "But the truth is, I had choices. I chose gambling over responsibility. I chose lies over honesty. I chose my own comfort over my mother's security. And when the consequences started catching up to me, I chose to destroy the person who loved me most rather than face what I'd done." The courtroom was dead silent. My mother spent her whole life sacrificing for me. She worked 2 jobs to pay for my school supplies. She emptied her savings for every fake emergency I invented. She gave me unconditional love for 38 years, and I repaid her by stealing her home and abandoning her in an airport. His voice broke. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve a second chance. I don't even deserve to be in the same room as her. But I needed to say this publicly for the record. My mother is the strongest, most generous person I've ever known, and losing her respect was the worst thing that ever happened to me." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Kian to 18 years in federal prison. Tony Marcelli got 25. Marcus got 15. As the bailiff led Kian away, he looked back at me one more time. No words, just a look that said everything he'd never been able to say before. Lyra and I were sitting on our front porch, watching the sunset over our thriving garden, when the letter arrived. My name written in handwriting I recognized, but return address from a federal penitentiary. "Are you going to open it?" Lyra asked gently. I stared at the envelope for a long moment. "Do you think I should?" "I think you should do whatever feels right for you. You don't owe him anything, not even the courtesy of reading his words." I opened it. "Mom, I know I have no right to write to you, but I wanted you to know that I've been getting help, real help, not just for the gambling, but for whatever was broken in me that made me think other people existed to serve my needs. I've been thinking a lot about that hamster you bought me when I was 12, Biscuit. I never thank you for taking care of him when I lost interest. I never thank you for a lot of things. The other inmates here think I'm crazy for writing to someone I'll never see again. But I needed to tell you that I finally understand what I threw away. Not just your money or your house, your love, your respect, your presence in my life. I know you've built a beautiful new life with Lyra. I'm genuinely happy about that. You deserve people who see your worth, who protect your heart instead of breaking it. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that every good thing I ever learned about love, loyalty, and sacrifice came from watching you. I'm sorry it took losing you for me to realize that. Your son, if I still have the right to call myself that. Kian." I folded the letter and sat quietly for a few minutes. "What are you thinking?" Lyra asked. "I'm thinking about forgiveness. Not for him, but for me. I spent so many years angry at myself for not seeing who he really was. But maybe that wasn't my failure. Maybe that was my love. Do you want to write back? I don't know. Part of me still loves the little boy he used to be, but I can't forget the man he became, and I can't risk letting him back into my life just because he's learned to say the right words. It's been 2 years since that day at the airport. 2 years since I thought my life was over. Our business has expanded. We now sell at 3 farmers markets and have a waiting list for our preserved goods. We're talking about writing a cookbook together. Growing Forward, Recipes for Starting Over. We've helped establish a support network for elder abuse victims that operates in 6 states. Agent Chen nominated us for a Community Service Award that came with a $10,000 grant, which we used to help other families rebuild after financial fraud. The cottage has become a gathering place for our chosen family. Weekly dinners with the Hendersons, the Nguyen's, Mrs. Foster, and whoever else needs a home-cooked meal and genuine conversation. I wake up every morning grateful. Grateful for Lyra's courage. Grateful for second chances. Grateful for the community that welcomed us. Grateful even for the betrayal that led me to discover who I really am when everything else is stripped away. But I still struggle with questions that don't have easy answers. Was I naive to trust Kian completely? Should I have seen the signs earlier? Could I have prevented this by setting boundaries when he was younger? And the biggest question of all, what do I owe the son who destroyed my life, but genuinely seems to understand what he did wrong? His letter sits in my desk drawer, next to the deed to our cottage and photos from our first farmer's market.
reminders of destruction and creation, loss and found family, endings and new beginnings. Some days, I think about writing back. Other days, I think about throwing the letter away. Most days, I just try to focus on the life we've built from the ashes of his betrayal. This community has become my chosen family too. Your support through your comments and messages means everything to me and Lyra. We read every single one, and they remind us that we're not alone in this journey. If you believe in second chances and the power of women supporting women, hit that subscribe button. Your stories inspire us as much as we hope ours inspires you. But I need your wisdom on something that keeps me up at night. So, what would you do? Should I respond to Keon's letter? Was I naive to trust him completely for so many years? Or was that just what loving parents do? Do you think people can really change, or do they just get better at saying what you want to hear? And here's the big one that Lyra and I debate almost every night. If someone betrays you in the most fundamental way possible, but then spends years genuinely working to understand and change who they are, do you owe them forgiveness? Not reconciliation, but forgiveness. Is protecting your peace more important than giving someone a chance to make amends, or is forgiveness something you do for yourself, not for them? I honestly don't know. 2 years later, and I still don't know. What do you think? Have you ever had to make this choice? How did you decide between protecting your healing and honoring your history? Help a couple of women who are still figuring it all out.